Hi YouTube, it's Corey. Today is Friday, June 26th. It's almost 1:30 in the afternoon. I hope everybody had a good week. I had a really good week, and I don't know. I just hope everybody's doing well. My day is going good so far. I started my day with a therapy appointment with my therapist at Hope Network. It went really good. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to see my therapist for a few weeks now, though, because she's at two different offices right now. So she has less appointments available at the office I'm at. So I have to wait a few weeks before I can see her, which I'm kind of disappointed about. You know, I got used to seeing her. She was checking in on me weekly throughout the coronavirus quarantine situation thing, and I kind of got used to that. So now this is kind of an adjustment having to wait this long. But she did schedule me two times before my surgery. Once at the end of July, just before my surgery. I am going to be having my surgery on my nose at the end of July. July 30th is the date of my surgery. I'm having surgery on my nose to help me breathe easier. It's something that's needed to be done for many years that I've been putting off, and I'm finally addressing. So that's happening. And so that's good that I see her a couple times before the surgery. I'm glad she arranged it that way. Um, so yeah, therapy is going good. Um, but basically, what I wanted to make a video about today was psychiatric medications. I wanted to kind of go through my history of all the different psychiatric medications I've been on and what my experience was like with each of them. So this is going to be kind of a longer video, so just try to bear with me here. Okay, let me get right into it. As far as the medications I've been on, as far as antidepressants, I have been on Celexa, Lexapro, Trintellix, and Wellbutrin. As far as antipsychotics, I have been on Seroquel, Abilify, Latuda, Rexulti, and now Invega. And as far as anti-anxiety medications, I have been on Tenex and Vistaril. So let me start from the beginning. The very first psychiatric medication I ever took was called Celexa. And I talked about that a little bit in my last video. You guys, if you saw my last video, you know a little bit about the situation. I was having some suicidal ideation, and I had police come to my apartment to prevent me from basically killing myself. I had my, who is now my husband, and my best friend and my mom kind of team up together and call 911 on me. And I'm very thankful they did that to this day, because that a lot of good came out of that, and I'm obviously still alive. So I'm very thankful that I had people in my life like that to care about me enough to do that. And those three people are still in my life today, and I'm very blessed for that. But what ended up happening was I was drunk at the time this was happening, and I was only 19. And so the police came to my apartment, and they found a half gallon of gin in my apartment. And so what happened was I was put on probation for 6 months for minor in possession of alcohol. I think I actually finished probation in like 4 or 5 months. I can't exactly remember, but I remember I finished all my requirements well ahead of schedule, and I believe she let me off probation a little bit early. But whatever the situation may be, I was on probation for quite a while when I was 19, and as part of my probation, I had to seek mental health services because the court system knew I was suicidal, and I had struggled with depression all my life since I was about 8 years old. If if you guys want to watch my previous video, it talks a little bit more about my history with depression. But anyway, the court system knew about this and ordered me to seek mental health services as one of the requirements for my probation. So I went to Life Guidance Services, which unfortunately is no longer in existence today. I believe they got bought out by Cherry Health Services. But at the time it was Life Guidance, and I thought it was a pretty good agency to go to. So I got involved with group therapy. I was seeing an individual therapist, and I was seeing a psychiatrist with life guidance while I was on probation. And the therapist and the psychiatrist came to an agreement that, I was suicidal, so I really should be on medication for that. So they did put me on medication for that. They put me on Celexa, and it was the first time in my life I had ever taken any kind of psychiatric medication. Um, and I noticed after about 2 or 3 weeks after being on Celexa, I started noticing a huge difference in my mood. My entire mood changed. I was a lot more optimistic. I had a better outlook on life. I was very positive and optimistic. And I just thought that the medication was a really good fit for me. I liked the results. So I kind of knew that psychiatric medication was for me at that point. And I've been ever since then. I've been on and off medication. There's times when I've gone off it completely. I've been on it pretty consistently though since May of 2016. But anyway, back then I was on Celexa, and I was on Celexa for probably about 3 or 4 years. But eventually, what happened is I'd moved to Seattle, Washington, um, and basically what happened in Seattle was I ended up becoming schizoaffective and losing my job, getting fired for that, and had a lot of different medications while I was in Seattle and a lot of therapy. But anyway, when I uh, while I was in Seattle, there was a period of time where Celexa basically stopped working after being on it for so long. So my psychiatrist in Seattle put me on Lexapro, which is, from what I understand, a new and improved version of Celexa. So I was on that for a couple years too. Um, when I first got on Lexapro, it was kind of the same experience as when I got on Celexa. I started to notice a huge difference, huge change in my mood, much more positive outlook on life, much more outgoing. Um, just big improvement in depression and anxiety. Lexapro and Celexa are SSRIs, so they work for both depression and anxiety and flashbacks and stuff like that, because I've had some issues with that. And, they can treat many different things. So, yeah, so it benefited me. It benefited me in a lot of different ways. But at one point, I was actually, before I got on the Lexapro, um, when I was still taking Celexa, before I stopped taking Celexa, I had Wellbutrin added to my med lineup. And I was on Wellbutrin from about 2016 to 2017. And I ended up getting off Wellbutrin because I was going through a period of time in 2017 where I decided to taper off like 2 or 3 different medications just for the sake of being on less medication. I just didn't like being on 5 pills a day, and I just wanted to decrease the amount of medication I was on. And at first it went pretty good, but towards the end it didn't turn out so good. I ended up basically hurting myself again. So eventually I was put back on Wellbutrin about a year later in 2018. So going off it wasn't really the best idea. I should have just stayed on it the whole time. But anyway, so oh, and also I have a video, speaking of that medicine taper I was just talking about. I actually have a previous video about that if you go way back in my channel from like 2017. The video is just called Decreasing Medication. And that's when I talk about that, starting that taper. So if you want more information on that, you can watch that video. But anyway, I was put back on Wellbutrin at the end of 2018 because, like I said, I started hurting myself again, and they get really concerned when you start doing that. So they re-added Wellbutrin. I was on Wellbutrin and Lexapro at the same time. After I moved back to Michigan, because for those of you guys who don't know, I'm originally from Grand Rapids, Michigan, but I lived in Seattle, Washington for 4 years. Became mentally ill when I lived there. Well, I was kind of already having mental health problems since I was very young, but officially became schizophrenic or schizoaffective, whatever you want to call it, when I was living shortly after I had moved to Seattle. So I've been in the mental health system for a very long time now. Um, but anyway, for a long time I was on Celexa Celexa. For a long time I was on Lexapro and Wellbutrin. Then I moved back here to Michigan, and I was having some problems with depressive episodes again, and I was taken off of Lexapro, and I was put on something called Trintellix, which, from what I understand, Trintellix is a newer antidepressant. It's supposed to have less side effects. It's an SSRI plus, I think, is what my doctor called it. So a form of an SSRI antidepressant. And it worked good at first, but it stopped working after about, I'm going to say, 3 or 4 months. So that medication really didn't last long. What happened was I ended up being taken off of it. I was on the Trintellix and the Wellbutrin at the same time, just a lower dose of Wellbutrin. And so what happened was, back in January, I'd come back. We visited Seattle in December for a couple of weeks. Then we came back, and when we came back, I had a depressive episode that started that just didn't go away. So I ended up in the hospital for about a week, and they took away my Trintellix. They were like, "You're on such a low dose of this that it's almost not going to do anything. Like, there's no point for you to be taking this at such a low dose. Like, we might as well just take you off of this." So they took me off the Trintellix, and they put me back. They increased the Wellbutrin. So this was back in January, and I'm still on the medication lineup they gave me in the hospital to this day. I haven't made any changes to it because it's working out perfectly. So I'm on an increased dose of Wellbutrin, and Wellbutrin is now the only antidepressant I'm on. I used to be on like 2 antidepressants, 2 antipsychotics. There's no more of that. Pine Rest, when I was in the hospital, Pine Rest is our local hospital that I was in, for those of you who are out of state. But I was in there for a week, and they took me off Rexulti and Trintellix because those weren't really doing anything. And so I'm only on 3 medications today, which is the least amount of meds. This is the least amount of medication I've been on since 2015, when I first got diagnosed. So I'm pretty happy about that. Less medication than I was on, and it's working out even better. So I'm pretty happy with that. But anyway, that's my history with antidepressants. Now let's talk antipsychotics. Back in 2012, I was 21 years old, and I had gone through a series of stressful events that year in 2012. And it was the first time in my life where, I really started hearing voices. And basically, I was in a situation where I was hearing some voices that had convinced me that I needed to really hurt someone in order to get into heaven. And so I consulted my therapist at Life Guidance about this. I was still at Life Guidance at the time, and she was like, "You really need to go to the hospital and have this examined." So I went to Pine Rest. That was the first time I was in Pine Rest, and it was May of 2012, and they put me on Seroquel to start out with, and it was good for a long time, but eventually I had to end up getting off of Seroquel. But anyway, it was very effective at first. It completely took away it took away the voices I was hearing, and it took away any thoughts I had about hurting anyone. And so I told when I got out of the hospital and I had my follow up with my therapist at Life Guidance, Katie Ellenboss, I I was telling her this, and she was like, "Well, that's probably because of the medication they gave you in Pine Rest." And I said, "Oh, okay, that does make sense." So the Seroquel, that's when I kind of realized the Seroquel is actually working. And Seroquel did work for many years. I was on it until I moved to Seattle. When I started getting mental health services in Seattle, that changed because what happened was, um, first I was put on Abilify, and let me talk to you about Abilify. The reason I was put on Abilify was because they wanted me on an injection because I was going through a period of time where I was having trouble remembering to take the Seroquel. I had been off it for a period of time when I first moved to Seattle, and I just got back on it, and I was having trouble remembering to take it. So they wanted me on injections. So they thought Abilify would be a good fit for me. And before I could be on the injection, they wanted to try me on pills. So I tried Abilify pills for 1 month. Horrible reaction to Abilify, you guys. It's probably one of the few medications I've taken that I just really didn't like. Um, I had horrible akathisia to the point where I was up all night, just moving around. Couldn't stop moving, had to be constantly moving, couldn't get comfortable, was constantly uncomfortable in any position I would move in. And this went on for a month. And so when I told my psychiatrist about it, she's like, "Well, it's been a month. If it hasn't gone away yet, it probably won't. So we really need to get you off that." So we decided to put me back on Seroquel. I developed a system where I started remembering to take the Seroquel, so I was on it for another year or so. But then what happened was we found out that Seroquel was causing my liver to be inflamed. I was having my liver monitored for several months while I was living in Seattle at Virginia Mason, and it was the Seroquel. So I told my psychiatrist about it, and she suggested Latuda. So I tapered off of Seroquel and gradually started on Latuda. And at first I liked Latuda. I was on Latuda for 1 year. And at first I liked it because it really helped with the more schizophrenic symptoms. But I started to not like it at the end of it because I gained weight on it. I gained over 10 pounds. And I was sleeping like 12 to 13 hours a day. And when you're sleeping that long, it's just not productive. Nothing gets done. It's just not a good life. So I just got sick of it, and I decided to go off of Latuda. So I tapered off of Latuda, and I asked my doctor about Rexulti because I saw a commercial for Rexulti, and I did some research on it, and I found out not only does it work for major depression, but it also works for schizophrenia. So I requested to be put on Rexulti. So I was on Rexulti for 2 years, you guys. Loved it. Rexulti was by far my favorite antipsychotic. And the reason it's my favorite antipsychotic is because it didn't have any side effects. You know what I mean? A lot of these medications have a lot of side effects, and it's just ridiculous. So Rexulti didn't have any, so I was real happy about that. But after being here for about after taking it for about 2 years, now I had moved back to Michigan, and I was going through a pretty stressful situation, and the Rexulti stopped working on me, and I started going into psychosis. So that is when my doctor started me on Invega. I have a few videos about Invega on here, so you may have already seen those. Invega has its pros and cons. I like it because it completely gets rid of my schizophrenic symptoms. I've been on this one for a year now. Things I don't like about it: weight gain. I gained about 10 pounds or so, 10 or 15 pounds. And the fact that I'm really tired a lot. It does make you kind of sleepy. So that is a problem I have with it. but the side effects aren't bad enough to where I don't want to take it anymore. You know what I mean? So I'm sick of changing medications all the time. So I'm just gonna try to stick with it as long as I can. Um, so that's kind of my history with antipsychotics and where I'm at right now with antipsychotics. Now let's talk about the anti-anxiety pills. In 2015, when I had moved to Seattle, I was having a lot of panic attacks at that time, and I didn't really know what to do about it, and I didn't know there was anything we could do about it. But I did talk to my doctor about the panic attacks because she was asking questions about them, and that's when she introduced Visceral to me in 2015. And at first, I was taking Visceral as needed, and I just loved it at first, you guys, because I actually used it during a panic attack and it actually worked. And I was really surprised it worked because I didn't really know if it was going to work at first. So I was very happy with that. I was very happy with Visceral for a long time. I started off taking it as a PRN, just as needed. But eventually my anxiety kind of got increased because in Seattle we kind of lived in a high crime neighborhood. I was constantly on edge because there was crime on the buses. I had to take the buses, and just in public places a lot. It just was not a good situation. So I was constantly on edge. So I started taking it 3 times a day because she was prescribing it. She was prescribing me enough of it to take 3 times a day. So I knew that was my limit. So I was on that for 3 years until 2018. And I got off of it because what happened was it does make you really sleepy. And like I said, I was taking it 3 times a day. So I was really tired all the time. So I told my doctor I was just sick of being lethargic all the time. And I actually asked to go on modafinil because modafinil gives you a lot of energy. And I thought it would be a good idea. But my psychiatrist did not like that idea at all. But she said, I do want to do something about your tiredness all the time. So let's take you off of Visceral and try you on Tenex or guanfacine, whatever you want to call it. Guanfacine is the generic brand of Tenex that I take. So anyway, I started taking that, and come to find out, Tenex also helps with ADHD. So it does benefit my ADHD. I take it for panic attacks and attention. And I've been on it for about 1.5 years now, since the end of 2018. And it works really good. And I'm not always tired and drained of energy like I was on Visceral. I haven't had a panic attack since I've been on this medication. I take 2 milligrams 3 times a day for anxiety and ADHD, and it does a very nice job. I really have no complaints about it. I do have another video about Tenex in my previous videos. If you guys are interested in that, I did a video about Tenex and Visceral actually. So that video has a lot of information about both those medications if you're interested. But yeah, that's kind of my experience with psych drugs, you guys. I hope you got something out of this. If you're thinking about taking any of the medications I listed, I hope that maybe helped you a little bit. But one thing I want to say is what works for me might not work for you because all of us have a different chemical makeup. So what's working for me right now, I'm on Invega, Wellbutrin, and Tenex, and that's working quite well for me, but it might not work for you. And what works really well for you might not work for me. So really who you want to talk to about this is your doctor, psychiatrist, or therapist. Those are the people that know the most about medications, not me. So talk to them about it. Ask questions. Do your own research. I like to research the medications I'm on and look up different kind of side effects and stuff like that they may cause. So yeah, other than that, I hope you guys are doing good. I hope you have a good weekend. I hope everybody, I don't know if I'm going to make a video by the 4th of July, so if not, I hope everybody has a good 4th of July. And that's about it. I'm going to finish up my schoolwork here today so I can hurry up and wrap up the rest of the summer semester and have the rest of the summer off. So, all right, you guys have a good day. Peace out for now.